you into some really weird conspiracy stuff. You're aware of who David Icke is?
Oh yeah, we know who David Icke is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then because if you look at vaccines, they would actually, in and of their nature, as a influence on vibration. If as I am stating that there's this 22 trillion times a second pulse that causes us to synchronize continuous creation and destruction of universe, and everything is energy, then a vaccine by its nature is something that is intruding into the, quote, material, which we know to be an energetic body, and it's affecting the energies that you use to manifest your body. Well, that if David Icke is correct, and there is an interdimensional parasitism going on, then perhaps a very good, effective way of obtaining the energies that this interdimensional, unseen, unseeable, simply because it's outside of our frequency range, dimensional entities, a good way for them to maintain their energy flow would be something like vaccines, which would interfere with the ability of your energies within your material body to generate as they would normally do so, and maybe a certain percent of that energy that's being disrupted is being bled off. I mean, it gets into some screwy thinking just like that when you start seeing how the vaccines are promulgated. It has more to do with, or rather there's another layer of it, which is, oh yeah, the big pharma, big pharmaceutical companies, they're trying to, just sell us a bunch of snake oil and just to make money. But in an energetic world, money is energy. It's transferred to and from, and people that accumulate it try and accumulate more. There's this whole energy greediness, and that may in fact just be a more gross manifestation of this same level of energy parasitism going on. So if you examine a lot of these things, it's like, David Icke may sound a little loony sometimes, but it doesn't necessarily make him wrong.
Well, speaking about David Icke and David Icke's concept, lizard people, I know that you've had a wee bit to say about that. What is your thoughts on all that?
On which specifically, sorry?
Well, you mentioned earlier that the moon is not a planet.
Yeah, there's facts, and then there's truths, and then there's interpretations in terms of how reality works. And a truth is something that we attach, is a fact that we attach an emotional reaction to. Emotional reactions usually have us delving down into what's known as our reptilian brain, which is based on this fight or flight duality. It's either one or the other. There's no real gray there. Yeah. So if I say certain things and people don't accept them, sometimes they're not accepting them because they've tripped or triggered down to the reptilian brain because they don't want to have to alter their entire worldview just in order to accommodate some of the things that I may say or David Icke may say. But nonetheless, there are facts there, things that are materially measurable, etc. And so none of the facts that David Icke is promulgating about the moon can be disputed. They are indeed facts. The conclusion that he's come up with is the same conclusion that I come up with. That given all of these facts, the size of the moon, where it's placed, how it's behaved when we bomb it, when NASA drops a rocket on it, when the meteors strike it, all of these things indicate that the thing is artificial. So from that point on, if you have a broader context of reality than you may find in the Sunday papers, then you start getting into other areas, like which is natural for humans. You say, okay, it's a big artificial creation. Then you say to yourself, why did they put it there? And then, who is they? And exactly. And then you start getting off on, and you start sounding like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, it's a big rabbit hole.
There you go, exactly. And the deeper you go, it's just, at that point, it's a question of which branch do I take at this point? And which level do we want to discuss it at? The idea that there may be inhabitants on the moon, even as an artificial structure, that are on the outside of the moon, now becomes much more probable as given the understanding that the moon itself is artificial, and then that also in turn makes the behavior of NASA and the U.S. populace, which went to great effort and expenditure over an entire 10-year period of time, half of a generation of our, quote, excess wealth was shot into putting humans on the moon, and then we say, we're done? And haven't been back since? None of the behavior since then makes any sense at all, unless you start factoring in some of the things like, it's an artificial structure, there's critters up there that don't want us buzzing around their heads, and they've told us so, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So under those circumstances, it's like, yeah, I think Ike is right.
Well, in terms of putting man on the moon, I mean, there's some people say that it's not possible in the first place because man cannot pass through the Van Allen belt.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and there's arguments to be made for that, pro and con, based on the viewpoint of us as energy. That our energies would be, as energy beings, we would be disrupted going through there. But the idea of us as material beings, or as energy beings manifesting matter, which is perceived in our senses, you also come to the point where it doesn't make a lot of sense that you should just be able to scoot through it with minimal, to say the least, radiation shielding, when the radiation levels are many times what we would have to deal with down here on the planet, and there's no reason to suspect that radiation is going to behave differently in space.
Sure.
So there is that. However, it's also, given the nature of the universe being an energetic creation that pulses at the rate of 22 trillion times a second, it is very easy to imagine a situation whereby travel is accomplished within spaces that our mind can't necessarily process. If you start looking at the human brain and the mind and memory and so forth, you find some interesting facts. The facts are that you might be bombarded with 5 billion sensory inputs in a day in a single 24-hour period of time. But you don't remember even a small fraction of those. You don't even process a small fraction of those. So it's quite probable that there exist methods whereby we could move your energetic body, which you manifest as matter, through the universe in a spatial form that does not require transit between point A and point Z. You don't have to go through the B, C, D, etc. You can jump there if you know how to do it. And basically you're just sort of stepping outside of the stream of creation in one sense, and then stepping back in another spot. And time, or rather the less time stuff is involved, so it would appear to be almost instantaneous. And that gets you around the issue of the Van Allen belts, and thus allows pretty nearly instantaneous transportation anywhere in the planet or anywhere in the universe, but does not, the very nature of that denies the ability of the universe to manifest things like time travel.
Which would basically take us back to Black Ops again, I would imagine.
Correct. And we have to acknowledge something as well, that in the nature of my work, I'm what I've self-described as a radical linguist, and I love words and parsing them, and it drives my wife crazy, and she wants to, take a cup and beam me in the head sometimes, and declares me to be like a lawyer, intolerable to live with. However, if you look at language and you examine not only the base words that are involved, but how it displays itself, there are certain interesting conclusions you can come to. Sure. And one of the things I did was to apply some of my software to what's known as the Federal Register of the United States. Now, the Federal Register doesn't really register anything. It is a federal document, but what it does is a listing, in a sense, of all of the contracts that are being let by the government over a particular year. So if you had this for a number of years, you could process the language that's being used in all of the wording and all of these tedious federal documents that are being let out year after year after year. And I noticed in one of my sweeps through some language, some interesting language coming out of the Federal Register in the year 1958, and I thought, now why is this language appearing here in 1958? And so I wanted to find out when it first appeared, and I found out that it first appeared in early 1956. Prior to that, the nature of the language was entirely different. Now, the subject of the language was basically what you and I would think of as black ops reverse engineering of, let's say, foreign material. And the language changed from exploration language that had been in existence from 1947 all the way up through 1956 to exploitation language in 56, as though a pivotal key area of a breakthrough had occurred, and thereafter they were no longer trying to explore or reverse engineer. They had discovered and at least understood to a certain extent the underlying principles, and now we're attempting to exploit it through the disbursement of this stuff through the corporate world. And so in my way of thinking, in 1956, the black ops of the United States, which pretty much is, let's say, 25% of the mass of the black ops of the rest of the planet, just based on numbers from money, took a very different turn for whatever reason. There was some kind of a breakthrough in late 55 or early 1956, and thereafter they attempted to exploit some of this stuff. So as far as we know, they've had this, there's been this separate civilization that's been in development since 1956 and has had basically a 50 to 60 year jump on the rest of us, using all kinds of really cool technologies and stuff that the rest of us are not permitted to have.
Well, on that note, Cliff, we're going to take a wee break. I'm going to play a song. Just to let the listeners know, if you want to get any questions across to me, or even perhaps if you want to come online here in Skype and possibly ask Cliff a question, my Skype name is Scottish Sovereign. If you want to come online and ask Cliff a question. Meantime, we're going to take a wee break, as I say, Cliff, and this is a song by Dire Straits, and it's called Brothers in Arms.
These mist-covered mountains are a home now for me, but my home is the lowlands, and always will be. Someday you'll return to your valleys and your farms, and you no longer burn to be brothers in through these fields of destruction, baptisms of fire, I've witnessed your son